It's well known that trauma can have long-lasting effects on your social, emotional, physical health. Trauma, especially during critical periods of childhood, can create lasting changes in the structure and function of the brain. Children who grow up in environments filled with fear, aggression and violence face an additional set of stressors that they must navigate in order to stay safe. These early experiences can lead to physiological adaptations that occur in predictable ways, ultimately impacting their future health, well-being and behaviour. But have you ever stopped to ask yourself why that is? How can events from early childhood leave such a deep imprint on your body and mind? In this video, we're diving into the fascinating neurobiology of trauma to uncover the hidden mechanisms that help to explain it. Did you know that brain scans of soldiers suffering from war zone related PTSD have changes in specific parts of the brain? Would you be surprised to know that children with significant histories of trauma show similar structural changes? How could living in an abusive or neglectful household during your childhood compare to a soldier involved on the front line of a battlefield? Well, it's all about the way our brains and bodies adapt to survive. So let's think about that a bit more. You're going to have a basic understanding of the neurobiology of critical structures in the brain and how they impact our behaviour. You're going to have a good understanding of how trauma affects key areas of the brain and their function. My name's Alex. I'm a forensic psychologist who specialises in young people with social, emotional and mental health problems, especially those that are engaged in antisocial behaviour and offending. Let's have a look at some of the key areas that are affected. If you've watched my other videos on child brain development, you'll know the brain grows in an inside-out pattern called the inside-out pattern of neuronal migration, meaning that different areas of the brain develop at different times. Despite this complexity, there are key structures in the brain that we all share, including those shared with our animal ancestors. Over millennia, the brain's been fine-tuned into a highly adaptable organ that's deeply influenced by the external world. This adaptability can be a strength, allowing us to adjust to our surroundings. However, it can also be a drawback if the environment's negative or lacks the essential elements that children need, like safety, security, and stability. So let's think about some different areas of the brain, how they develop. The forebrain is responsible for complex behaviors, emotions, regulation and thinking. The midbrain's more about sensory motor integration and alertness. The hindbrain's about our unconscious survival functions and motor coordination. So what's the first area that we're going to think about? Let's go back to that limbic system that we said was really key to understanding trauma. The amygdala is a small almond-shaped part of the brain that plays a massive role in emotions, especially fear, anger and stress. It activates when we sense something threatening in the environment and is associated with our fight or flight responses when we recognise danger. It helps us feel and react to emotions like fear, anxiety and excitement, and is involved in processing our emotions. It links strong emotions to memories, so we remember events that were scary. It can help store information to help us make decisions later and identify what are threats and what aren't. In simple terms, the amygdala is your brain's alarm system and emotional centre. It helps us stay safe and understand how we feel, the idea of interoception. I think of the amygdala a bit like a sonar on a submarine. It's constantly scanning the environment for potential threats. When it detects danger, whether that's real or perceived, it communicates with other parts of the brain and triggers responses that have evolved to keep us safe. This part of the brain plays a key role in our fear responses and our emotional regulation. So we know from our last video that areas of the brain that are close in proximity have strong and fast connections. Remember that phrase? What wires together, fires together. Located near the amygdala is the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus's role is to ensure the body physically responds to external stimuli. In simple terms, the hypothalamus makes sure your body runs smoothly and stays stable no matter what's going on around you. If we think of that analogy of a submarine, you can think about your hypothalamus as a torpedo's control system. When the amygdala, the sonar, detects threat, the hypothalamus fires off torpedoes, hormones like adrenaline, cortisol, that prepare the body for action. The amygdala is the alarm, and when it senses danger, the hypothalamus triggers the release of stress hormones, preparing your body for fight or flight, freeze or flop. Together, they make sure you're ready to face and escape any potential threats. Research supports the view that children who've experienced trauma have constantly activated stress systems. This continuous set of activation puts a massive strain on the body and the brain, especially when it happens repeatedly over time. I always like to think of it like a smoke alarm. Smoke alarms are designed to tell us when something life-threatening is happening, like a fire. But how many times have you experienced a fire in comparison to the amount of times an alarm's gone off? It's usually burnt toast in the office, boiling over a hot pan of water, frying something way too hot. We want our smoke alarms to be hypersensitive. I'd much rather have a false alarm than not be alerted to something that was actually life-threatening. The same way, a child who's experienced trauma may have an alarm system that's hypersensitive and responds to everyday situations as though they were dangerous. Instead of responding to genuine life-threatening situations, their systems are flooded with stress signals triggered by minor events. These things are mostly unconscious and therefore out of a young person's control. This chronic stress response can impair emotional regulation and keep individuals in a constant state of heightened alertness, even when there's no actual danger present. The technical term for this is hypervigilance. This helps us understand why young people with histories of trauma often struggle in situations where other children have little or no response. The trauma they've experienced has shaped their brain to see threats everywhere. So what was once an evolutionary mechanism to protect us from life-threatening harm now reacts to perceived psychological, relational or social stresses as if they were life-threatening. So we know that when the brain shifts from the prefrontal cortex, rational thinking, to the midbrain, fear response, it bypasses logical thinking and triggers automatic survival instincts, which can lead to heightened emotions, heightened emotional reactivity, impulsive behaviours and difficulties regulating stress. So think about it in your settings. Consider the young person who's called out in front of the class and reacts by becoming abusive, throwing a chair or storming out the room. Or maybe it's the young person who's told to wait for something that they've been looking forward to and becomes rude, aggressive and starts acting out when they're told it can't happen now. Maybe it's the young person who sits at the back of class and when they're called out, immediately hood up, head down, he disengages. In simple terms, the hippocampus is like the brain's memory card or GPS system. It creates and stores new memories, especially long-term ones, like remembering what you did yesterday, learning a new skill, or trying to access your memories of what's happened to you in the past. It helps you know where you are and how you get from one place to another. It helps connecting our memories and emotions by linking with the amygdala, so we can remember how we felt during certain events. If we go back to our submarine metaphor, the hippocampus can be compared to the ship's navigation system and logbook. Its role is to map out the journey, store critical data on where we've been, how we got there, help us find past routes that made sense, help us make decisions to more effectively move from place to place based on prior knowledge. So what does trauma do to the hippocampus and our memory storage system? Research shows us very clearly that chronic stress and trauma can shrink the hippocampus, which impairs our ability to store and retrieve information. As a result, individuals with a history of significant trauma can struggle with concentration, memory recall, particularly when it's important to access memories to inform current decisions or future plans. The traumatized brain also tends to prioritize negative memories, encoding them more strongly whilst downplaying positive experiences. This bias makes problem solving even more difficult because the brain can't access successful times from the past. So if the hippocampus is like the ship's navigation system, chronic stress or trauma can damage the way the system runs. It can cause the logbook of memories to become disorganized and incomplete. The system can start to flag past threats, storms and attacks, whilst neglecting to record calmer or more successful memories or moments. The mind becomes fixated on past dangers, leaving little room to focus on solutions or charting a more positive path forward. So we've now thought a little bit about that midbrain. What about that CEO center? In simple terms, the prefrontal cortex, it keeps you organized, in control and able to make good decisions. This part of the brain is key in controlling strong primal instincts and regulating strong negative emotions. We know that trauma can impair the prefrontal cortex, making it harder to think clearly, manage stress or control our impulses, leaving us at the mercy of strong negative emotions. In our submarine metaphor, the prefrontal cortex could be seen as the submarine's command center, where the captain and crew make critical decisions to plan missions, to regulate the ship's overall operations and functions. It's responsible for ensuring that the submarine stays on course, responds to challenges thoughtfully and avoids unnecessary risks. When trauma occurs, it's as though the command center's communication systems and decision-making tools are disrupted. The radar becomes cluttered, making it hard to focus on long-term goals or carefully weighing up the pros and cons of different decisions. The captain, decision-making abilities, can be overwhelmed, reacting impulsively to immediate alarm instead of strategically planning and addressing the bigger picture. Additionally, if trauma happens early in life, it's like the command center was still under construction when the stress hit. Some of the key systems like impulse control, problem solving, and emotional regulation just aren't functioning. This can result in erratic course changes, unnecessary evasive maneuvers, or even freezing in critical moments, significantly impacting the submarine's overall ability to complete its missions. Trauma and chronic stress can alter the brain's threat detection and memory system. The amygdala becomes hypervigilant, reacting to even minor stresses as if they were life-threatening, while the hippocampus struggles to store and retrieve positive memories. This can make emotional regulation and managing problems really difficult. Understanding these changes is key to supporting individuals who've experienced a lot of trauma. We can help them learn new ways to manage their emotions and foster an environment that tries to develop healthy emotional regulation. So what further insights can brain science and psychology offer us to help manage this? YouTube usually suggests a nice video to watch after, so I'm sure it's going to recommend something decent for you. How about that one? What is it? Let me know in the comments.